Thank you, Senator. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, how many people have been killed in these rail accidents? Most recent ones?
Well, in the most recent ones, we have not had deaths in the U.S., but in Canada there were 47.
Those are all oil, trains transporting oil, correct?
That's correct.
There's another way of transporting oil, isn't there?
There are many ways, yes, sir.
I mean, what's the most efficient? Pipelines?
You know, there are lots of ways.
Have there been anybody killed in a pipeline accident recently?
There have been people killed in pipeline accidents.
Recently? 46?
I have to ask our PHMSA administrator.
Is the administration at all considering, I realize Keystone XL pipeline is a different issue, but are we considering other pipelines to take some of the burden off of the rail system?
We are modal agnostics in DOT. If there is a mode to move something, we try to make sure the safety standard is met. So however it moves, our job is to make sure it moves safely.
Would part of your job also be make sure it moves as safely as possible and cost effectively for the economy?
Well, that is, our job is to ensure that however stuff is moving safely, sir.
I believe I'm correct that most of the capital expenditure for freight rail is actually paid by the freight companies themselves, or the rail companies themselves, isn't it?
If you take out the cost of the infrastructure that they ride on.
So educate me on that. So what does the federal government pay in terms of infrastructure on the freight rail system?
Well, it depends on, you know, for the short line rail systems, we have historically provided support to ensure that the track is safe. The Class 1 railroads tend to self-fund their track more so than the short line railroads do.
So out of your proposed budget here, how much would be spent on freight rail systems?
Well, we would propose to put $19 billion into rail.
That's primarily passenger rail, right?
Primarily passenger rail, but because in many cases passenger rail and freight rail are running on the same track, there will be benefits to freight rail as well.
Okay. Well, I was a little confused because you seem to be making the case that a lot of the increase in spending here is about the increased rail traffic for freight, but it's really the freight companies the rail companies that pay for that themselves.
Well,
I mean, to a great extent. That's primarily their capital expenditure.
There is no substitute for predictable, sustained federal investment in our infrastructure system. And when it comes to non-Class 1 rail, we have some significant safety and efficiency needs in rail.
Current transportation spending is what, about $45 billion?
Roughly.
And the gas tax revenue is about $34 billion? So we've got about $11 billion per year deficit.
I think it's closer to about 15, but 15. Shortfall, 15 billion. Closer to 18 billion, sir. Sorry.
Okay, so what is the outlay then versus the revenue?
I would say we're generating about 34 billion through the gas tax. Okay. And so if you add about $52 billion.
Okay, numbers I have about $45 billion. Okay. So you're going to propose increasing that to about $75 billion per year. And, you know, so you're going to be spending more than $40 billion, or about a $40 billion deficit.
Yeah, well, we're trying to both address the shortfall in the Highway Trust Fund, but also to increase investment in our nation's infrastructure.
Understand. By the way, that's a top priority. Are there any discussions in the within the executive branch there, interagency, about prioritizing spending as opposed to looking at increasing taxes? Because I actually think infrastructure spending is a high priority of government. Who else going to do it? States and the federal government. Any discussion in terms of taking, you know, for example, some of the GAO reports where we have duplicated programs, and maybe take some of that lower priority spending, some of the duplicated spending, and allocate that toward transportation spending and infrastructure?
Well, it's an interesting question that you raise, because we have had experience in this administration in the DOT with improving the efficiency by which projects move through our permitting process.
I do know in the GAO report, there are about 55 duplicated programs in DOT. Have you analyzed those, and have you canceled any of those programs?
Well, we are working as hard as we can to ensure efficiency, and there are efficiency provisions in our proposal that focus on streamlining and making sequential permitting processes more
I mean,
concurrent.
specifically to the GAO report, are any of those duplicated programs within the Department of Transportation, have any of those been eliminated?
You know, I'd have to take a look, sir, and respond back to you.
I'd appreciate that answer.
Yeah,
Thank you.
got
Thank
it.
you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator.